Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. Today's episode is featuring two of the raddest bands that you may have not heard of right now, and I'm excited to bring them both on the show. First up, I'll be speaking to the New York rock band Warren the Duke about their fantastic new album, All That Solid, and what else is in store for the band this year. After that, I'll be speaking with the Corpus Christi band New Ends as well to talk about their awesome album from last year, Everything's Better, and their new music as well. I'm pumped that I get to talk to both of these bands today because they're great, so stay tuned for both. You won't regret it. Welcome to Season 4 of the Powered by Rock podcast. We'll bring you the best stories in rock music with a focus on highlighting independent rock musicians and their music from all over the world. No, rock music isn't dead. It's getting better and better. It's just time for you to start paying attention again. With that said, let's get this party started.
The mountain's gonna rise and fall by me.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. I'm pumped to bring on Dan McCool from the New York rock band Warren the Duke today to talk about the band's new album, All That Solid, which I did do a review on, and I was just blown away by how rocking the album is. It has a huge sound, and I would say it reminds me a lot of the first time I ever heard the Foo Fighters album One by One, which has the songs All My Life and Times Like These, and I was just thinking, damn, that's good. Like, that's exactly how I felt when I was listening to All That Solid. So after I listened to the new album, I was like, wow, I gotta talk to Dan. I gotta do this review. I've got to put more attention on these guys. And even at times I struggle to find words to kind of properly explain what I was hearing because it was just like that big. And I was like, I don't even know, like, what are other words for big sound? Like there's only so many things I can think to say, but I'm excited to have you here. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Isaac. Flattered. That means a lot. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think I actually saw, after I did my review, I think I saw another review talking about how that reviewer thought that you had some vocals aesthetics kind of like Dave Grohl's as well. So I must not be the only one to kind of draw those comparisons, but it's not like you were setting out to create a Foo Fighters album or anything like that. It just kind of, it's a big sounding album. I mean, I've listened to the first album that you had and then this one, and it's something behind it. Just got a little bit more juice to it. So I was thinking, like, obviously you guys have been around for a while and then you took a bit of a break after that first album. Have you guys been active or were you just like not kind of on a hiatus, or what was the journey like from before the first album released, once the album was released, and then how you came to essentially releasing the new album?
Yeah. Well, like a lot of bands, I don't think that there was ever a decision to not do the band anymore after the first record. And I think we had some lineup changes. And, some of the members were traveling and touring with other bands and tour managing other bands and things of that nature. So I sort of use the word we loosely because there was always sort of a revolving door of members and fill-ins and things. We had members in New York. We're kind of half situated in Boston as well. And so we had some friends filling in Boston. And it just, when things aren't clear with like who the membership is and what you're promoting and what you're working on, things can very easily fall apart without anyone meaning it to. So that's kind of what happened after like 2016, 2017 or so. And then of course, I moved away to Boston and that just kind of made things harder to stay in touch with people down here. But we eventually, I think I guess it was 2021, one of my bandmates was just hanging out with a guy who owns a great venue around here, just like, and just texted me one night and said, "Do you want to play a show as Warren the Duke?" And I was like, "We don't have a guitarist, but we kind of had someone in mind, friend of a friend, if we ever did want to get back together again." So it was kind of like not really this grand plan. It just like one show happened. The show went really well. We had a great time. And I think after that, we kind of just, got together and we were like, maybe we should write some more music. And it's really been sort of this weird thing where I never really thought that I'd get the band back together again. I thought it was really a one album thing, but it's great to have this kind of microphone. And of course, COVID didn't help, like with all bands, but we're sort of relaunching after that now.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things that COVID didn't help, but at the same time, it kind of helped people focus on what they wanted to move forward with, right? It was like this time to stop and say, like, look at all the stuff that I've been doing. Is it really worth me driving in that direction, or should I go back to something else, or should I do something completely new, or what? And so I think there's been a ton of new bands that have come out, bands that kind of resuscitated themselves after COVID. And it's just been this like kind of grand reawakening of like musicians, especially because I think for obviously like almost better part of 18 months to 2 years for a lot of bands, they couldn't even play together. They couldn't play shows. They couldn't, record or do whatever. So it's a lot of introspection, right?
Yeah. People needed to get creative with, how they put music out and what putting music out sort of looked like. My other band in Boston played another band called Ruin the Night up there, and I just played trumpet in that band, and just like with some old friends, and we were like recording in each other's apartments, like kind of wearing masks, like in different rooms, like someone's like in the kitchen, someone else is like in the living room or whatever, someone else in the bedroom, like recording from all these different rooms. So it was like a kind of a dystopian kind of recording situation. I mean, I guess that's how all recordings are, as people are in different rooms, but for different reasons this time. So we needed to get creative in my other band, and then but I think that COVID it gave people a lot to write about. I mean, if nothing else, and just feelings of like kind of isolation and frustration and things like that, and obviously that plays pretty well into writing and playing punk rock songs. So we kind of use that energy for this album, that kind of sense of alienation, to write songs on this new album.
Yeah. And in the song, obviously the album itself isn't just about, like the gap in the time and everything like that. You've had some personal struggles, obviously, that you've been dealing with that kind of went into the writing of this album. So I was curious, like, obviously in the press release that I got, it mentioned, references to divorce, addiction, and just some other, personal habits and things you had to overcome, like challenges and stuff. So can you talk to me and to everybody kind of what was that kind of, how did the personal life stuff kind of really start to come out and map out like songs in this album?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't super different from the first record. And like, I always like joke that like the first record was written in 2015, which was a really, really bad winter here in New York City. And it was like a historically bad, like a blizzard every day. And we kind of thought we had it bad back then. That was 2015. And obviously,
little did you know that the end of the world was still to come.
Yeah, totally. It's just been crazy since then. So, I mean, I think that, I've always really been drawn to like, to sort of, punk rock music or rock music or music in general, that deals with pain and loss and regret and sort of isolation, but then sort of crawling your way back up again. Like I love like Social Distortion, I think is like a lot of very kind of just bare bones, like raw emotion, about those sorts of topics. So, I think that, punk rock, like I grew up really loving the sort of like, I don't know, external nature of punk rock. Like you're like dancing at a show, you're like in people's faces, you're screaming at the top of your lungs, your ears are like bleeding from the music, from the guitars and the drums or whatever.
It turns out these amps aren't supposed to go this loud in this tiny room.
Right. But that serves a purpose, when you're a kid, and then when you're feeling like a kid when you're older, you can always sort of go back to that. But I also, so that sort of externalized nature, but I've also been drawn to sort of the more, especially drawn to the more, the sort of lyrical content, the musical content where people are struggling with something within, that they've been dealing with. And I think that's sort of what, we tried to do with the first record, frankly, too. But with this record, it was especially sort of poignant with everything happening in the world, personal struggles and things like that. So this was just, not for, to sort of be a little cliche about it. It was kind of like a way to process a lot of grief, was to sort of externalize it and write it out. I'm a strong believer that you can't really, you can't really deal with pain and trauma unless you externalize it somehow, and music is a great way to do that.
Yeah. And I think especially for people who don't feel comfortable talking about their feelings, it's way easier for them to write a song about it, right? It's like, I don't know why, but I can tell a million people or whatever this information, but I can't tell one person who probably actually needs to hear it the most.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's almost easier to tell people in general about something than like one person or two people. So
yeah.
So in that sense, it was great to just have this as a resource. And I guess that's kind of like, like I said, I didn't think we'd ever like write another album after the first one. And then it was kind of like, hey, I'm going through all this, terrible stuff. And I don't know, I do have a band. We never officially broke up. So why not use this as the vehicle to express a lot of that?
Yeah. And one thing I think there's some points in the album and certain parts of the songs where you do tend to point to maybe situational stuff, but then in a lot of times you're not specifically pointing to any one thing. You're kind of generalizing a feeling or generalizing, the pain in itself. So when do you think, like, do you ever look at a song and go, man, that's too personal, I gotta like kind of generalize this a little bit more? Or do you think there is such a thing as being too personal in songwriting?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's a good way to put it. Like you just said, I mean, you're walking the line between the specific and the personalized,
Yeah.
And I think that, it's kind of cool. The closer you get to the general, the sort of general way of putting pain, the closer you get to sharing that with other people, like no one else shared my specific stuff from the last 3 years. I didn't share other people's specific stuff from the last 3 years or beyond, but like everyone can identify with loneliness. Everyone can identify with, isolation, feelings of abandonment, feelings of like getting back up again, everyone can identify with that. So I guess like I try to err on the side, lyrically of going towards the more general stuff that people can identify with, for sure.
Yeah. And I was going to say kind of a good example of that is a song that we're going to have people hear after we're done with this segment. But the song Anniversaries, obviously the title lends itself to assume that there's, good and bad memories from anniversaries. Right. And then obviously once you divorce somebody, it's like, they're all tinted with that end result of being, in a mess of a situation. But you get this concept that, year after year, you're having these dates come up that you're like, oh, fuck, this is that date or whatever. And you're like, but at the same time in the song itself, it's not specifically saying like, I fucking hate April 30th or whatever, because that's the day we did this or something. Right. So like kind of explain like that balance between the idea of the song and what you're actually saying in the song.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. It's very much like just anniversaries in general, are tough. Even good anniversaries brings a certain amount of pain to them. I don't know, not to get too philosophical, but life is a mixture of both. The good and the bad, and the joy and the pain, and so I just I think I wanted to write a song about how I felt about a certain anniversary, and like that. That song was kind of like, I guess I'd call it some kind of a fever dream. Like I just was getting a line in my head, when I was like trying to sleep that night, and I got up, with a guitar at whatever, middle of the night, and sort of these lyrics came out that didn't really exactly, it's not how I would explain. The lyrics didn't explain how I felt, but it just, like there's just the sound of the words kind of explained it. And, but I felt like just this really extreme sorrow and really extreme kind of optimism at the same time, which is, I think, what that song just kind of came out as a kind of cocktail of those two feelings, So, but yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely just like dates in general, reminders in general, triggers in general, like they're all there. So.
Yeah, and that kind of throws me back to like grunge scene back in the day, like Nirvana songs. You listen to the lyrics and you're like, what the fuck is he talking about? But like as the song kind of plays as a whole, and the somberness or the mood of the song plus the title, you're like, I kind of start to understand what the song is about, but lyrically, I'm not even sure what he's fucking saying. I'm like, I don't understand. It kind of draws me to comparisons like that, where it's like, it's poetic and there's something there, and there's definitely something, but like, you don't necessarily get it from just reading the words in straight in order like that.
Yeah. I think I kind of aspire to do that more, just actually like be as non-literal with lyrics as I can.
Yeah.
And if I were a better lyricist, I'd be able to do that all the time. But I love, like, I mean, Nirvana, like a lot of people, was one of my first influences when I was like 13, and then went to the Pixies and like Sonic Youth and stuff like that, and all that stuff was also just very like, the words are a feeling, they're not actually describing something literal.
Yeah.
Which is
I mean,
why
I still don't understand a single Pixie song. I don't think there's one that makes sense. Like, I don't really get it. Like,
well,
I enjoy the songs. I just don't understand what the fuck's happening.
I went to UMass, which is where they went and where they met in Western Mass, UMass Amherst, and they wrote a lot about classes that, not to answer that question, but they wrote a lot about, I don't know, weird movies and like classes that they took with weird professors and stuff. So there was always like a lot of folklore about the Pixies, and like we UMass kids actually knew what they were writing about, whereas most people didn't or something, but we probably still didn't either, you know?
Yeah. And I definitely watched Shea and Delusia back in college, and I get the reference, but I'm like, I don't really understand why it's fit into this song. Cause I'm like, I don't understand what the hell the rest of the song is about, but yeah.
Yeah. That is a songwriting trick that I always tell people, and I don't use it enough, but it's like, if you run out of things to write about, just find like a weird old movie or a weird old novel, and just don't even watch the movie, but just read the Wikipedia article and just write about it down, and just be like, it's about this old movie, and people are like, oh, you're right about, it's just kind of a way to fill it in. So
yeah, I think Alt J is one of those bands that kind of just writes odd songs about stuff like where the wild things are and stuff like that, right? Like they'll just put drop a book in there, and they're like, is this really about where the wild things are? Or you just got bored and put in like one line from that, and you just said that's what it's about now.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
And obviously I read in your guys' bio that like you had some influences and comparisons to, you'd mentioned Social Distortions like Mike Ness, Hot Water Music, and Against Me. And I can definitely hear a little of the Hot Water comparison and some of the Social Distortion comparisons. But to me, I think it's more of a rock heavy sound now. It was probably a little bit more punk on the last album. I think this one's kind of more like, I don't know, big rock. I don't know how you'd explain like the Kiss and the Foo Fighters and stuff like that, like big rock bands. So it leads me to wonder, what are some of the main influences of the band, and what was the sound direction from one album to the next?
Yeah, it was kind of all over the place well, the first record was engineered and I guess, mixed by Jay Mass from Defeater. Okay. And so I remember we went in there and we had like a small budget, and Jay was like, we kind of like did everything like over a weekend, like very, very quickly. And Jay was like, I'm going to give you a record that sounds like the type of record that I record. And Jay had this very like iconic drum sound, for instance. And he was like, basically, you're not going to get in there and be able to tinker with how it sounds too much, but it's going to be like a Jay Mass record. And I was like, that's fine, because I love Jay Mass records, like the way that his records sound. This record had a little bit more, I think we just spread it out a lot more over time. And we had basically two different people sort of engineer it. One of my best friends, Chris Duggan, who lives on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, who I play in another band with, he kind of got it started. He recorded a lot of the guitars. He sort of engineered a lot of the sounds that we got, especially on guitars. And then Jeff Berner, who is here in Brooklyn, he's got a Studio G, or he works at a studio called Studio G in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And he's just got like a really big, you mentioned sort of like Dave Grohl and Foo Fighters. I kind of think of Jeff as kind of like the Dave Grohl of Brooklyn. Like he even kind of looks like him. But he's just very tuned into like big rock guitar sounds. Yeah. And he's able to do that very well. He does a lot of other things very well too. But I think that their stamp is kind of all over this record in a way that I loved, and in a way that was, kind of intentional. Yeah. But no, I mean, I think like we played some records going in there. I think a lot of like the kind of more modern Against Me records, to talk about sort of influences, like their last two records, I think, like since 2014 or so, I just really loved the the bigness of the sound on those records. They almost sound like kind of Springsteen records, like some Americana influence. But it always goes back for me to there's that record White Light, White Heat, White Trash by Social Distortion, and the guitar sounds on that record are like just so creamy and wonderful, and like everything I've ever tried to record as a singer of a band has been trying to go back to that Social D record. But yeah, so
it's funny how we do that, like as people that play music, right? You're like, man, there was like one album that like if I could just get my guitar to sound like that, like for every song, I'd be like fucking stoked. But like you buy all this equipment, you buy all these amps, you buy all these guitars, and you're like, I still can't get it. I still can't figure it out. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and the engineer will always just be like, that was a different time and a different studio
Yeah.
with different types of guitars and different players, and so it's not easy to I think in the age of like digital recording, we think we can just like screenshot a sound and just put it onto another record or whatever, and it's just it's really a lot harder, a lot easier said than done. So
yeah, there's actually the opening intro guitar for the song. I think it's called "Who Would Have Thought" by Rancid, where it's like bling 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 boom 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 boom. I'm like, fuck, I love that riff. Like, that's such a cool riff. I can never get it to sound like that. It sounds like shit every time I play it. It doesn't sound like all reverby and just like cool like that. I'm like, it sounds rinky. I'm like, fuck, I don't know. I still can't figure it out, but yeah.
Funny. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I think that record was that's probably my favorite Rancid record. Which really stood the test of time. Me and my friends used to listen to that record in high school all the time. Life Won't Wait, right? And I still go back to that record a lot. A lot of good parts on that.
Yeah, and while everybody's all about "And Out Come the Wolves," like that was like their big hits, right? Like Time Bomb and all that stuff. But then you go to the next album and you got Blood Clot 360 and all these other awesome songs on there, and you're just like, holy shit, like there's that whole album was pretty spectacularly done. And I think it was because obviously once you get some success, then you can go make an album that you really, really want to.
Yeah,
it's great. Yeah.
That record was like, it was like kind of during like the big ska. It was like 1998, I think. That was like right in my wheelhouse of when I started to really get into music and really start to be like someone who like got into albums or whatever, and it was like Dickie Barrett was on that album, I remember, and
he was
like from the ska world, but
great
record. Glad you brought that up, Isaac.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's one of those albums that like I like, it was kind of tailing off of my kind of I had a huge punk like phase, and that was kind of tailing off towards the end of my punk phase, and then I was going kind of like indie and more emo and stuff like that. Although I didn't ever call it emo, it's just like that was what it was labeled later. It was like, it's just indie rock. Like if you're talking about your emotions, it's not emo. It's like if you're crying about your emotions, that's what I always called emo, like Dashboard Confessional or something like that. But
there were a lot of emo like purists, I remember, who were like because like I guess like Fugazi was kind of the original emo band or something. I'm just like hazily remembering this, but people were like, emo is actually just, it's emotional hardcore or whatever, and that was like the original thing for it. But
I never heard that Fugazi was ever called emo, because that's a very interesting take on emo.
Yeah, well, it was like hardcore that went into non-screamy kind of like, and that was
sure.
But no, but then it sort of morphed into the more Dashboard Confessional stuff. We're actually going to, and we just saw that they're playing. We're going to go see Dashboard Confessional soon. So still
guilty pleasure, huh?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Indeed.
Very cool. All right. So I have an interesting question for you, because I have what I call my Mount Rushmore of musicians. So like bands, musicians, single musicians. I put just single musicians on there because I feel like they have a certain quality aspect about them. But I'm curious as to what your 4 musicians you would put on your Mount Rushmore of musicians would be.
That's a really cool question. I like that, Isaac. Is that something you ask every interview, or?
No, I ask different questions of everybody. So
cool. All right. Not to get meta, but that's a great question.
Thanks.
You should ask each band that. Anyway, for Mount Rushmore musicians, I mean, kind of like we said, probably like Kurt Cobain, I guess, to be somewhat cliche and generic about it. But I mean, honestly, like every time for me personally, like as a vocalist, I think that and you can hear it now, I'm going through some shit with my vocals this week after this release deal. But no, I think
not more like Kurt Cobain than just like,
I know, I'm probably more than I want to. Yeah. At least I don't smoke anymore, but he's probably the first influence I had in terms of like being, someone who sings, punk rock music. Probably Trent Reznor. I love Nine Inch Nails. I love just like screaming nihilistic stuff at the sky, and that just feels good. There's something really cathartic about that. So I love, Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor for sure. Mike Ness, as we said. I think that like that, for me, just like you can kind of hear the pain in his voice, and obviously that comes from like a big sort of like Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, kind of background, but I think he just kind of brings it all in with this like kind of perfect tone.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Number 4 is hard. Like, um, probably like a mishmash of a lot of people. Frank Black, I guess.
Okay.
I guess we've all talked about these bands throughout the whole interview, but definitely like Pixies, kind of like quiet, loud, quiet sort of formula is what I like to use in Warren the Duke and other bands I've been in. So, and then a bunch of honorable mentions, but those are the big 4.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, some of those guys are absolutely some of my favorite too. I tend to try to play as many different kind of musical instruments as I can get my hands on. So for me, it's Tim Kasher from Cursive for his songwriting and singing. I mean, his singing is so, he's never taken any lessons. So it's like one of those things, you either like the way that he sounds or you just like, he can't sing. Kind of like a Billy Corgan, but way better at singing than Billy Corgan. Billy Corgan always disturbed my ears, but I was still liked Smashing Pumpkins to a certain degree.
Yeah.
So then it would be Neil Peart from Rush, the drummer. I still think he's like the god of all drums. I don't understand how anybody ever played drums that well. Dave Grohl's up there for being just fucking phenomenal at pretty much anything he does. And it's like, how are you that good at everything? Like, it's fine to be that good at like one thing, like Les Claypool on a bass guitar, like from Primus. Like, I don't understand how he's that good at bass guitar, but then he can play like 12 other instruments too. And then last but not least, mine would be Joey Cape from Lagwagon for just literally being able to do anything punk or rock related and it always sounding good. He's like a chameleon of musicians. Totally. So yeah.
Well, but on Dave Grohl, I mean, I just think like he just loves music, and I mean, we all do if we play in bands and whatnot, but I think that just comes through the most when I hear him.
And he's always happy to like support other bands. He's happy to like play on other people's music. He's happy to like join 10 bands at one time just because like he's like, what else am I going to do? I mean, I've got kids. They don't need to know that I'm home.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's cool. So yeah, I mean, Pixies were absolutely one of my, I mean, the song "Where's My Mind" is still, I consider it my favorite song of all time. So that's a huge, I think that guitar riff at the beginning and how it kind of ends with that haunting vocals from, I think it's Kim Deal, or I think that's Kim Deal on that one.
Yeah. We tried to cover a Pixies song for the release show last week. We tried to do Valoria is my favorite Pixies song.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And, we tried to do it, and it's just like, I don't know. I feel like every time we try to do a cover song that's a little like, our guitars are just like real crunchy, and like you said, kind of big, and I just feel like it ends up sounding like kind of a cock rock version of whatever song we're doing. So we didn't end up doing it, but someday we'll cover a Pixies song for sure.
Yeah, you just have to play like little tiny amps or something like that and mic them up or something.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I mean, I'm not a very good guitarist. Like our lead guitarist is like, he's actually like a guitarist with like a capital G kind of like shredder, all that stuff. Like, and I just do power chords, but so it kind of lends itself somewhat to what the Pixies do, which is like very simple kind of power chords and then some like crazy experimental guitar stuff happening. And so we can pull it off someday, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. And obviously, other than the album being released, I think when this comes out, it'll be a couple weeks old, but I mean, the album is out, so anybody can go check this out. I think it came out technically 3 days ago from today, but you guys just had your album release show. I think you guys did that with Fat Heaven too, right? Like you guys jumped on the same show. They had kind of their album release show with you, right?
Yeah. We had like a dual release sort of thing. And we had just originally booked it at Our Wicked Lady in Brooklyn. And it's one of our favorite places to play. It was the first place we played after a big hiatus. And Fat Heaven was on the bill. And then they said, do you want to do a dual show? And it just seemed to make sense. And it was great. Sold it out and just had an amazing crowd, a lot of love in the room, a lot of energy, a lot of like, it was like a little pit going on, especially for them. And, it was just like a super fun show.
Yeah. And I like how you're like, sold out, no big deal, like whatever.
Well, I don't know.
That happens every day for every rock band, right?
I don't know if we've ever done that before, so this is the only week I ever get to brag about it. So
exactly, and I would be like, we fucking sold it out. It was fucking awesome.
Good times.
So, do you guys have like any sort of like plans to play more shows? Do any kind of regional touring? I know the band's kind of separated geographically. There we go. That's the word.
We're playing next month in Brooklyn again on the 16th of April at a place called Gold Sounds. with a band called Shrug Dealer, who are really great. They're one of our favorite bands around here. Some members from the band Something Bitter, who we played with the other night. And yeah, so that show is on the 16th. And then we are looking at sort of doing some more extensive stuff. It's like, today's Monday when we're recording this, and the show was Friday, and like we were really burning it at both ends. As you can hear, I've got like some kind of bronchitis or something. Like it just like really, really exhausted ourselves doing that. So today I was going to sort of sit down and start to do some more planning, but we definitely want to do, some more weekend stuff. I mean, in the past we've played a lot in like Boston, which, like I said, we've got some roots there, some friends up there and stuff. So, but yeah, hoping to get out and tour, somewhat extensively. Our drummer is leaving town in a few days. He tour manages the Interrupters, so he's going out of town for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months or something. So he'll be sort of back here and there, and we have some
until he can say, okay, it's worth playing some music that's not on tour like the Interrupters.
yeah. But he's a busy guy, so we're just trying to work around that a little bit. We've got some sort of substitute fill-ins that everyone's pretty comfortable with. So, kind of just like sitting down and mapping it all out on paper and seeing what works. So
very cool. And I do want people to hear a song from you guys before we go. So I want to make sure that I just say, obviously, thank you so much for taking the time. It was good. I know we had to reschedule this because you were literally about to die from sleep exhaustion last week when we first scheduled this, which I thought it was weird that you wanted to plan it for the same day as everything that you had going on. But I was like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah. No, Mondays, I'm somewhat energized on Mondays, at least for the first half of the day.
Yeah.
I think it was a good day, but yeah, thanks, Isaac. This was really fun.
And you guys, when you're listening, go check out the show notes below this episode. You can get links to the music, links to the social media, all that stuff. Go check out Warren the Duke. There I'll drop some links to the other bands. I think you're gonna like at least one of the band. If you have links to that, I'll drop it in there as well. And make sure you go check out the album. I'm trying to think. All That's Solid. I'm thinking All Solid That Ends Well. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
Close. ATS.
Yeah. All That's Solid. But I want to play a song from that album called Anniversaries from Warren the Duke. And I just want to get your permission, Dan, from the artist who actually has the rights for this song. Do I have your permission to play this song during this break?
You have my full legal, moral, ethical blessing to
awesome.
Whichever song you like.
Yeah. So go check out those links below and stay tuned for Anniversaries from Warren the Duke. And it's going to play us into the break, and we'll be back right after this.
When a time we're shaking. Reverend Guitars embodies the idea that every run of scorching lead and every roll of finger-picked twang deserve the same passion and commitment to quality. Whether you're selling out arenas or playing in your living room, we know that what makes an instrument powerful is when players wield them to create something remarkable. A melody that moves mountains, a riff that just won't quit. We want to be there in your hands when that happens. For us, that means staying true to what we believe. Somewhere along the road of electric guitar history, it became a crazy idea that guitar makers should craft guitars with the same sense of purpose and passion, whether they're played in a bedroom or an arena. If that's a wild idea, then we're in the right place, carrying 6 strings and an attitude, and we're in good company. Reverend Guitars. Well played.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Powered by Rock podcast. I'm here with Brandan Platz from the Texas punk band New Ends to talk about one of my favorite albums of 2022, plus how they got to play with one of my favorite bands of all time and some more. So, hey, Brandan, welcome to the show.
Oh, what's up, Isaac? Thanks for having me, dude.
Yeah, of course, man. It's great. So, like, I want to start by saying I absolutely loved the album Everything's Better. I know you have a new single out. We'll talk about that as well. But I think I listened to that like 10 times the first week it was out, maybe more, to be honest with you. And I did an album review, and I can't remember what I rated it, but pretty high. I know it was up there pretty high. And it's one of those albums that I would say it's kind of like every song is meant to be where it's at in the structure of the song tracks, like the list, and they're all really good. So I want to talk to you about what was your process going into the creation of the album. I mean, this was your first full-length album, but you guys have kind of put out other songs and maybe even an EP from memory. But this was like the first full album. So how did this kind of come about?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm actually very flattered that you complimented the set list.
Yeah.
Because that was actually, I think I took the most time trying to get that to fit it in like a perfect puzzle, exactly where everything, the flows needed to go, where the transitions need to go. So to hear that it actually paid off is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I wrote it, I think I wrote it over about a year, a little less than a year. It took to really get it all together. But for the most part, it kind of started falling together towards the end. I think it was like Punch Drunk came out first, and then True Spit was written. Then I wrote some of the smaller songs in between. I think the very last song I wrote was Manifested This. But for the most part, it was written in small chunks.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of personal, I guess, references without being too personal, if that makes sense. And I'm kind of curious as to like, how do you go about writing songs? Because obviously you can be really, really personal and specifically name people, places, things, but you don't seem to do that too often. I don't recall that ever actually happens where you name a specific person. You do talk about family members from memory. And there's a lot of interpersonal kind of relationships that you talk about, but how do you know how to kind of write specifically about people or kind of leave it general? Is it just you don't feel comfortable writing too specific, or is it like too personal?
In the beginning, it was kind of like I didn't really want to name drop anything because, things happen, things go. So,
yeah.
But I like to leave it kind of vague. That way anyone can kind of just jump on and relate to it, kind of fit it the way they need it to fit. And I like to use the symbol of love a lot if you listen to it. And it's not necessarily like I'm some dude with like a ex-girlfriend or anything. But it's just like you can use love for several different things, if it's a relationship or if it's a like a passion type of thing. But I like to leave it open-ended. That way you can make it your own.
Yeah. And I seem to remember some stuff about like parents, I think maybe specifically about your dad. And I don't know if there's like a dramatic theme or a thematic theme or whatever you want to call it of the entire album, but it kind of seems to go through a process of you reconciling your personal life with you becoming an adult, right? So like your childhood, other relationships. Is there anything that like kind of, I don't know if there was like, I don't know your entire backstory, right? So like there's not a whole lot of, hey, Brandan Platz, here's his whole life story right here, like laid out on the internet, but kind of explain to me, like, how did your actual life kind of play into the writing of these songs, and how did it kind of, when I say the track listing kind of flowed, it seemed to make that growing up and becoming an adult thing chronological almost, but with like some splices of memories kind of woven in there too.
I think it was your review that you wrote. New Ends was kind of like a diary for me.
Yeah.
In a lot of the ways, that's what it is. And mainly that album kind of serves as stuff that I didn't really want to talk about or didn't know what to talk about, so we just write a song about it and kind of let it be what it ends up being. But as far as my backstory and all that goes, there's hints of it in there. Really, I like to write for other people that don't really write or don't really know how to express it themselves. So a lot of that has to do with the kind of the storyline in it. It's mainly based around a character named Spanx, which is he's a guy wearing a mask, and you don't really know what's under the mask because he's not too sure himself who he wants to be, what he wants to look at, type thing. So to be able to write around that, try to help him grow up, I feel like I was able to grow up a lot too, and just kind of tell my story with some, like, I guess like a outlet, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention that because you're one of the very few bands that actually has kind of like a band mascot, and obviously it's called Spanx. You can kind of see it right behind you. There's like the skeleton kind of guy there. And, you know, that character makes some appearances in your music videos and the cover art, obviously. But where did that idea to have like a living representation? Like, did you decide like, hey, we're actually going to have somebody dress up and do this on our music videos? And did you actually kind of think that you're going to have it as a recurring kind of theme or mascot for your band going forward?
No. So growing up, my little brother's actually the drummer for the band. So growing up, we got real into like Sum 41, Blink-182 type bands who never really served. They never really had a mascot, but they had the attitude. Yeah. And then we were also really into like American traditional tattoo art and all that. So we'd mess around with skulls, flowers, swords, snakes type of thing a lot. And so he drew the cover for Burnout, which was the original, just this flaming eye skeleton. And we kind of took it from there. So he really just started off as like a drawing, a doodle that my brother made, and then we're like, let's incorporate him into a story somehow. That's where I think his first appearance was the Burnout, like I said, but then he also came out in the Punch Drunk music video, the lyric video, and then from there we're like, what if we made him into an actual like character that we put into an actual video, like a live action thing,
person wearing a mask,
And then
I want to talk to you about that animation on that. How did you guys come up with that lyric video? Because that was pretty damn good animation. Did you guys do that yourself, or do you have to outsource that?
My brother. Yeah, my brother Bradley. He's the one that does all that.
That's crazy.
That's dope, right?
How long does that take him? Because that's got to take, I mean, I'm not great at drawing, but even just like, I still don't understand how animated movies are made. I'm like, that would take 100 years to draw all those frames. I don't understand it.
I'm not exactly too sure how it works either, but I do know it's kind of like bit by bit.
Yeah.
So you draw this scene, then you draw that scene, then you draw that.
So you just turn to him and say, "Hey, make us a lyric video, and it better be awesome, you son of a bitch."
Yeah, please. Yeah, exactly. I asked him the other day if he was still up to it, just because like I don't want him to think like he has to do it just because he's in a band. So it's like, if you got time, do you want to? And he said, "Yeah, I want to." So we kind of leave all the creative up to him, and he's been killing it.
Damn, that's awesome. Did he do all the cover art and everything for the album, all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, he drew that behind me. He drew for just about everything. New Ends, you see the single covers and all that. It's him.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, because I feel like almost every band has like at least one sort of either photographer or graphic design type of artist in their band. And it's like, how the fuck do you have to play the music, you have to help write the music, you have to then record the music, and now you're just going to be like the graphic designer / illustrator or whatever. It's like, how the hell do you have that time? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess people
he's been able to do it. So I'm grateful. He's really been able to bring an image that I wanted to see, type of thing. Like for the album art, he asked me what I wanted. I said I wasn't really sure, but I just want something that's going to look good on a wall, because I was collecting vinyls like crazy, and I would hang them up on the wall and stuff like that. So
he actually reminds me, I still don't have your vinyl, which I need to get onto.
Oh, I'll send you one.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah, because I can put it somewhere in here, right behind.
I see it right above the dropped out.
Yeah. I'll take down Decent Criminal. I'll be like, you guys, you're off the wall now. And Tristan will text me like, why aren't we on the wall anymore? I'll be like, I don't know. Don't worry about it.
That's what I need to get. I was trying to figure out what's a good backdrop so you don't see how dirty my garage is. And I was like, I'll put this thing up, but I need one of those walls because that's pretty sick.
Yeah. I try to put up, independent musicians so that way we can see more from them and highlight bands that not everybody's going to hear about. I do need to rotate it more though, because I think these ones have been up there a little while, but I just put up Dropped Out this year and a couple of other ones. But yeah, in the wide shot, you can see all of like a wall, but now it's just like 6 or 7 of them, but whatever.
Yeah.
So I know you guys obviously did some touring on top of obviously recording and releasing the album last year. So one of the things that I won't say jealous because I'm not good enough to be jealous of you. I'm not that kind of level of musician, but I would say if I ever got to play a show for one band or play in a show that I was like opening for one band, I would probably do it for Toadies. And you guys actually got to do that. And that was like, holy shit, that's a pretty big deal. And they're a pretty big deal in Texas too. And you got to open for them in Texas. So what was that experience like for you guys? And are you guys fans of the band at all?
We are actually. And a big thing with Toadies is like you can catch Toadies in Corpus like maybe at least once a year, once every other year.
Yeah.
And it's always sold out. So it's not even that I thought about that going into that, but I kind of knew it in the back of my mind it was going to be a big show type of thing. It was fun. It was an experience. It was a different kind of structure than what we're used to. We're kind of used to showing up like at the show, and then you go on like 10 minutes, you go to the back turns before you start, you get on, then you play, you leave or whatever. But this was it was really organized, and it was kind of cool because I've been to Brewster's, that venue here in town, but I've never actually been to like the production side of Brewster's or whatever. So it was cool. It was cool to have someone coming up to us, ask if we need anything. There was a time they were like, "We got beer in the back for you." He's like, "What? Yeah. 2 cases of free beer back there?" That was pretty sick.
Meal all right, so we're gonna drink this before the show. What's after the show?
Yeah, so it was fun. It was a lot of fun. The dude and the Toadies are cool. It helps out that I love the songs too. So it was it was an experience.
Yeah, and I can imagine like for a band that was big in the 90s, like, and this is the thing, like they've been making music pretty much nonstop since, well, there was a couple little hiatuses there, but they've always had music coming out, and they went independent again, which was kind of cool. Like most bands that essentially when they get signed to a big record label, they're either like, okay, we'll just keep pumping out records that sound exactly the same so that way we can keep our record contract, or we're going to do things our own way, and the record label can either like it or not. And in their case, the record label did not like what they wanted to keep putting out. So it was interesting that they went back to being independent and now run through like, more independent record labels, which I always appreciated that about bands that I liked from the 90s that then still made good music, did it their own way, and then got, independent away from big labels, because there's too many bands out there that if you listen to them in the 90s, and then you listen to their last album that might have come out a couple of years ago, it's like, what the hell changed? Like, you're still making the same garbage music that you played back then. I was like, I didn't like it then. It's still bad now. But
that's cool. I didn't know they were indie. The bass player is actually part of Titus too. His side band. I can't remember the name of the band, but they're that's what we were talking about back there with him too.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah. So what's kind of the trajectory that you guys are looking at for New Ends? I mean, obviously you guys were probably in bands or played music before New Ends, but then did this start kind of after the pandemic or during the pandemic that you wanted to kind of put New Ends together? How did that all come together?
So it was we started before the pandemic, but like we started maybe 2-3 shows in, and then it hit.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't get very far. I think most of our progress was made last year as far as out-of-town shows, local shows, building an audience and stuff like that. So
yeah,
that was the bulk of it was last year, and we're just trying to pick up running this year. Then we play our first local show this month, and then from there we'll see what happens. But for the most part, we're just keeping on from where we left off, trying to.
Yeah, for sure. Keep the momentum, because it's one thing to release an album and it's like, oh, we did something, we accomplished something great, but it's like, well, that's not the end of it. Like, we got to keep going. Like, this is just the beginning. Like, this is what spurs us on, right? So I do want to ask, what were some of the kind of influences you had when you were kind of growing up playing music? Like, what were you listening to that, I mean, New Ends for me is rock music, but then it's like punk foundation, or in some songs just flat out punk music, but then it's like some poppy, not so poppy, more emo. There's like a lot of good mix in there. So kind of explain, what were you listening to when you were kind of getting into playing music?
I think the first band I ever really latched onto music-wise would probably be like Guns N' Roses and Rush.
Okay.
The more like classic rock, 'cause my dad was big into classic rock. And then when I started hitting puberty and all that, trying to figure out who I was type of thing, I was listening to a lot of Blink-182 and Sum 41 and all that. But I guess that'd be the majority. Those West Coast punk bands, and then Misfits, Simple Plan, those types of bands. I got into a little bit of indie, not too much, like Bright Eyes and Lydia and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's just gonna be straight up pop punk bands that I listen to.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think your music has a big sound, but then it's polished like pop punk, right? So it's like it's got like this really gritty rock stuff that's coming up, and then it's like it sounds like a really just clean pop punk sound. So I'm like, I can tell there's layers there, but I can't tell what exactly it came from. Like maybe like I don't know, Kiss or something. Like I was like thinking like something big, some big arena band like that. But Guns N' Roses makes a lot of sense, and Rush obviously they're fucking insane. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense too.
Were you into Rush?
Hell yeah, I'm into Rush.
Dude, I bought
Holy Triumvirate.
I bought the Russian Rio vinyl. It's like
Nice.
3-4 different vinyls, and it was like $80. I finally found it at I think it was in Waterloo.
Very
It's
cool.
like my holy grail right there.
Yeah, I mean, my one goal was to ever like there was like 4 musicians I ever wanted to have on this podcast, and Neil Peart was one of them. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but I was like, if I could interview Neil Peart, like that would be amazing, because I truly don't think there's ever been a drummer alive that was ever as good as him technically, even if there's faster drummers or louder drummers or whatever. Like Neil Peart, like he just had everything that was like in any sense of the word. Like you just play something cool, Neil, and he'd be like, I got you. And it was like the most mind-blowing shit you ever seen on drums. You're like, what the holy shit is this?
Yeah.
So,
And then when he gets up and his whole set rotates around him.
Yeah. It's like, no big deal. I got a 360 set. We're changing songs. I'm going to switch to the other side here. Whatever.
Yeah, that was
Then they
cool.
have to like airlift them out with a crane so they don't have to disassemble the no, but awesome. So I do want to take a quick break so we can play a track from your last album. This is going to be Punch Drunk. I always want to say Punch Drunk Love because of the movie, but it's the song Punch Drunk. And I want to get your approval so that way Spotify, YouTube, and all these other algorithms and things know that it's okay for me to play your music video for Punch Drunk. So do I have your full verbal consent to play Punch Drunk?
Let's play Punch Drunk.
Stop I can't believe this. Something so simple as in years of fire makes it hard for me to try. I don't believe you. I think I'll take the longer route. Gives me time to sort it out. I can't believe this. Something so simple as in years of fire makes it hard for me to try. I don't believe you. I think I'll take the longer route. Gives me time to sort it out. Bunch drunk, good luck. I'll go dance and rush like finding diamonds in dust. Hidden in ashes that might keep me from you. I hope it all stays the same. I hope it all goes away. Is that too much to ask? Bunch drunk, good luck. I'll go dance and rush like finding diamonds in dust. Hidden in ashes that might keep me from you. I hope it all stays the same. I hope it all goes away. And there won't be nothing to keep me from you.
Running your own music career is incredibly difficult. Trying to get people to like, share, comment, listen, follow, it's all just overwhelming. Most musicians give up before they ever achieve success, and that's the worst. If you're looking for a better way to grow your music career, head to DIYrockcareer.com for some absolutely free training. It costs you nothing, and it could be the difference between hitting your goals and quitting your dream. Go to DIYrockcareer.com today by clicking the link below this episode.
Then I lost my way.
All right. Hey, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the music video Punch Drunk by New Ends. I know it's pretty freaking rocking. So I always like when I listen to it, I get pretty pumped. So hopefully now you're back listening to us and you're like, oh, it's that guy from that band. That fucking band rocks. So so welcome back. Hey, Brandon, I want to talk about what you guys have coming up for 2023, because I know you did release the new single Much Better Now. From memory, I don't think it's all acoustic, but it is on an acoustic guitar. I think there's some other instrumentation in there as well. But talk to me about the song a little bit, and then what else you guys got going on for 2023.
So for the most part, I started writing already. Hoping to do another album. If not another album, a few EPs, split it up
Sweet.
or whatever. But that song was meant. I think I'm gonna do a full version on that song on the album. But I was kind of just recording something, putting it together, getting it out there because it's been a while since we have dropped anything.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like the standing point. My original idea was to make a whole separate album, but I think it'd be cool if I kind of made a bridgeway between the first album to the second album, just to show like the progress as far
Sure.
as the storyline goes. But I think for the second album, we'll be focused more on a different character. We've mentioned him a couple times, Mr. Mess.
Okay.
We have the song Mr. Mess, but then I think maybe we worked on the idea more like within the band. But it's just gonna be bringing out the guy in the devil's suit. I think we've seen him a couple times on some merch or whatever. But
Nice.
he'll be the main point of what the second album is.
Nice. So you guys are going like full rush, basically putting together kind of concepts within your albums, huh?
I think the concept is the way to go as far as the album is, because it's like a whole, it's like a piece of
Yeah.
art. Instead of having a whole bunch of different tracks just like piled together, you have one giant piece of art. And I think that's kind of where albums should be.
Yeah. It's kind of like instead of just drawing a character, you're putting like a whole painting together, right? You give the scene, the environment, the atmosphere, all that stuff.
Yeah, we don't do stick figures. We do fully developed landscapes.
Yeah. I feel like one of these days you're going to push your brother over the top and just be like, hey, can you do the artwork? And he's going to come up with stick figures. And you'd be like, what the hell is this? You'd be like, oh, I don't have time. Sorry.
He may.
He's going to listen to this episode and be like, stick figures, that's a great idea. If that's all we need, then that's all I'm going to do. No, but do you guys have any shows or anything you guys are playing, any fests or anything that you know of coming up this year?
Nothing that we have nailed down right now. We're going on we're going to do like 3 shows in May, Corpus, San Antonio. Then it's looking like El Paso. We'll do those back to back. We have a few shows next week. I think maybe a show or 2 in April. But for right now, we're just trying to nail it down, get the songs recorded and out.
Cool. So kind of taking a break from any major moving around kind of thing, so that way you can kind of get the next thing going, huh?
Essentially, that's what it is.
And do you think that you'll be recording the album this year and releasing it next year? Or do you think that you're going to try to do whatever it is like and release it this year, either your EP or an album?
Well, I got I think about 3 songs already recorded, so I'm hoping to get about the first EP dropped maybe about May or June.
Gotcha. Okay. So
Yeah,
you're gonna
with-
do like probably like two EPs to make one full album kind of thing. Is that what you're thinking?
What I'm thinking is 2 EPs and then a full album being about like 6 unreleased songs. So I guess
Gotcha.
all in all about 3 EPs, I guess.
Interesting. Okay. So
Something
yeah.
different.
So you have to do about 18 songs roughly. Then is what you're thinking.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Bare
Interesting.
minimum.
Yeah.
I'm
Like,
thinking
well, this EP's 9 songs. This EP's 10 songs. This LP is now 12 songs.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm thinking about 4 on the first one, 4 on the second one, and then a total of like maybe 13, 14 songs in the
Okay.
last one.
That makes sense. Very cool. Well, I'm excited as hell to hear it because whatever you put out, I mean, every song that I've heard so far is pretty incredible. I think if you want to,
Thank
go check out the album, make sure to go check out Everything's Better. Came out last year, but then you can check out the new song, Much Better Now, which it's funny because you've got like Everything's Better, Much Better Now. It's kind of like, it's
a
like an
progression.
improvement cycle, right?
Yeah, exactly. So everything's better is meant to be like a sarcastic saying, like, yeah, sure, everything's better, but like
Yeah.
really it's not. Much
Yeah.
better now is kind of like the bridge to get into where maybe it can be better. So then we'll see what happens with the album.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today, Brandon. Guys, make sure you go check out the show notes below this episode to listen to the music. Go check them out on social media, follow them, like them, listen to the music, go buy an album, go buy whatever, and make sure that you support them because I have a feeling when you release this next album, Brandon, that you're going to get even bigger and then you're going to be playing even more festivals and doing more cool shit. Maybe you'll be headlining and have Toadies co-headline with you. That'd be nice, huh?
Hey, that'd be sick.
But yeah, guys, make sure to go to the show notes and check out those links below. And remember, the Powered by Rock podcast is powered by our listeners. To show us some support, please be sure to subscribe and share the podcast on social media. If you're listening only to this podcast and not watching the full video, you can watch the full video interview on our YouTube and Spotify channels as well. Also, if you like reading, you can go to poweredbyrock.com to check out some of our awesome content, also to shop our merch and our gear. So go to poweredbyrock.com to see what's good there. That's our show for today. I want to thank you so much for checking it out. Until the next episode, we'll see you soon. Until then, rock on.
What was supposed to be